Right, done. Okay, welcome everybody. So we've had two apologies today. Katrina and Katina, sorry, and Nerily. So they're not with us for this session, but they're going to catch up on the audio, on the video. So we've got Helen Sanderson joining us at 1 o'clock. So she'll be here for the hour. Is that right, Susan, for the hour? Yeah,
that's right. Yep.
Okay, so we've got a bit of time beforehand. So I think we'll start off with a check-in, and then just a bit of a kind of catch-up in terms of where we're all at. I saw that you'd posted your canvas into the group, Zane, which is cool. So let's start with a check-in. What's been happening for people? So let's just get kind of back to basics. What's been happening for everybody? Where you at? What you've been focused on? Yeah, coming into the room today.
I'll go.
Great.
So we've just been doing a little bit of work on our website, actually. With our Access All Areas, that's ready to go. And so we're just starting to promote that. The Access All Areas, if you remember, was event access, ramps and beach matting and grass matting, things like that. So just revamped the services and products, now called Services and Products page on our website, to include all of that with a quote form and a few other bits and pieces. And I think I might have mentioned that we are now the WA distributor for Moby Mat and Moby Chair, which are beach matting and beach wheelchairs through Push Mobility. That was our supplier that we dealt with. And then we've since cut a deal with the WA distributor of that now. So that's kind of handy in our little travels. So that's a product that we provide now. And I'm not quite finished with that page. We're going to start promoting that we can procure all of the gear for a trailer full of event access. So rather than people go and look around to find all of that gear, we'll provide it all for whatever the cost is, plus a procurement fee. So our target there is local councils of any description across Australia at the moment. So once I kind of get our guys organised to set the trailer up so that we can take a few shots of all the gear on there, then we'll start promoting that as well. So that's kind of taken up a little bit of concentration and interest. As far as the Cinefly goes, we've got a meeting with them on Monday just to kick our videos of our leisure buddies off, which is the little project or the experiment that we're doing for this. So that's ready to go, and that will go in a different section of the website. That'll go into where our leisure buddies page is, and that'll all be YouTube's. The storyboards are all done. It's just a matter of getting a few people to start recording. And it's pretty much a do-it-yourself. It's like, take this shot and say these things, answer these questions. Now take this shot, and it'll roll for 15 seconds. So there's about 8 shots. We kind of simplified it a fair bit from the initial storyboard. And so that's ready to go. We just need a few bods around the table so that we can introduce them to it. And then we'll start with our young guys who are not shy with that stuff, and then we'll encourage our more reluctant people into that. And at the end of the day, they'll kind of, not that they'll be forced, but it'll be in their better interest to have a Cinefly YouTube, because the young guys will be getting the work, because participants will be picking them because they can actually see who they are as well as see a resume. So so that's kind of where we're up to in that little sphere, if you like. There's plenty else going on, but that in that area, that's it.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Zane. Sounds excellent. I'm just reminded of, the Better Caring. I think I've shown you it before. Better Caring, the organisation, this is kind of like a dating site that people can go and choose their support on the site. Have you seen that?
Haven't seen it. But
you haven't seen it? All right. Well, I'll post the link in. So that's kind of like a dating site, and you can see staff members' profiles, and you can go and choose staff. But the thing that's been really interesting is when I've showed that to support staff, over like half the room hate the idea, and then half the room love it, right? But the thing that always comes out in the conversation is what people like is the ability to promote yourself, not through coordinators or through other people. Overwhelmingly, I mean, it's a really good animation. I'll send it to you. But yeah, that is the thing that people, that's what I'm reminded of. They all really like the idea that I promote me instead of somebody else doing it.
Actually, that would be really good, that thing, because we do have to win a few hearts with this idea.
Right, okay, I'll send it.
It's one that we've imposed because we think we know better. You know, rather than it being left to be a ground up thing. We do need the buy-in, of course, but we think that at the end of the day, our participants deserve to choose who comes into their life rather than us telling them who it'll be.
It's great. I think it's a great initiative.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting because that conversation will be partially held Monday.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll definitely do that today. Okay, I'll go next, seeing as I've got my mic off. What have I been focused on? I'm over the moon that Building Brilliant Teams, the book is finished and has been produced or published. So I'm really happy about that. That's been, I don't know, a love-hate job. But yeah, anyway, that's out. So I'll be sending everybody a copy of that if you're interested in it. And I've started writing for the Rethinking org. So that's definitely taken me a bit longer. And apologies, Graham, because I know you wanted the stuff around decision-making and teams. So I've started to write that as well. So yeah, that's where I've been. Got 2 books that I thought I would share with you. So this one I'm in the middle of, which I am loving. So if you liked Teal, if you liked Rethinking Orgs, I've put the title and the authors in the chat space, so you can just copy the link. So this one's brilliant. And then another one that was recommended, and I haven't read this, but you'll know Justin O'Meara Smith, who is the CEO for Interchange. Justin, yeah. He recommended this, and this is about social media, and apparently he reckons it's absolutely brilliant and very applicable to our world, human services. Yeah, so I'll put that title in as well. So they're the stuff that I've been focused on the last week or so. But I think that's me, really. So, Susan, let's go to you.
Well, this is my last day of my traveling work trip. So this is my 17th bed in 5 weeks. So I'm very, very, very ready to be home in Wellington in my own bed. What I've been thinking about mostly this week with the various orgs that I've been working with and visiting is, how do I say this without sounding horrible or judgy? They're lovely people who love each other a lot, but they're so focused on keeping the harmony and doing well for each other that they are they're making themselves ill. Especially this org that I've been doing some work with, that I was at their completely distributed team, but they focus on helping people shift out of careers they hate, normally in later life, to careers that they love. There's one human at the top, the founder, who just holds everything. He's got a fantastic team around him, but they're going so full on all the time. They never take the time to stop and take stock and say, right, is what we're doing really healthy for us, and how we love each other. So of course, if they're already at the point where they truly care about each other, surely it should be easier for them to have this conversation, distribute the work a bit more, start to organize that way. But there's just something in them. And again, it's back to this thing that's been really, I think we've talked about it last time, this parent-child dynamic. It's the head of this org. He's like this combo of boyfriend, dad, and I don't know, best guy friend. And yeah, it's just really been focused on how we turn up in work and how that reflects the other relationships in our life, and what that either enables or disables, especially in small, well small teams of people that really like each other. So yeah, that's just a random thing that I've been thinking a lot about. I have no idea what the answer is other than to help people see it for what it is. How about you, Nat?
I've just had to go back through my calendar and have a look at what the last kind of 10 days has looked like. So I'm still feeling a bit tumbly at the minute, but I've had a couple of days off this week with kidlets and school holidays. Interesting that you're saying about how what we're doing at home and in work and how that comes into play. I'd spoken about the Superpowers app that we've been using as a bit of a team gauge. I gave it to my husband to do. I had a business with him for 10 years, and it's been quite interesting thinking about home and work, and that, as you say, those same things play out. And so I'm so intrigued by, I spoke about it a bit last time, but bringing this wholeness to work and how goddamn untidy that is when you do that. And, you know, being safe to do it and knowing, you know, how far is enough. I've been working with the back office working group about how we communicate about those types of things, because I think, you know, we're just realising more and more and more that the thing that's needed isn't the tasks, it's not that work, it's that work, which is the hard bit for everybody to get their head around. And I was reading a bit of Seth Godin's stuff, which also fed into home because it's around schooling. Have you seen his manifesto on schooling? Yes. Which is, you know, an amazing piece of writing, and I love it. But just with him talking about, he speaks about how we learn really early on that compliance and competence are two things that we need to value above all else. You know, you learn it in school, but that, you know, and that the opposite of compliance in a school sense is failure. So, you know, when you don't comply, you get a big fat F on your thing and you're bad. But actually, perhaps the opposite of compliance is creativity. You know, we kind of beat out of kids really early on, you know, I was called a troublemaker many years ago and it's stuck with me for years, you know, because once you question status quo, that's, you know, where people put you. But also that then competence is the enemy of change, because anyone who gets a kick out of feeling like they're competent isn't really prepared to feel like they're incompetent at any stage. So they push back pretty hard when there's any change that threatens that. So, sorry, long-winded. It's interesting where these things are sitting, and I'm just really interested in putting them in work and in home and noticing, what happens, I guess, when you just put your ego down and let it all roll into one and understand more personally, you know, the way it impacts communication styles. And interestingly, my husband's two things on the Superpowers were the same as the two girls I work with every day, who I love to bits, and he does my head in. But so it was quite an interesting reflection around what that meant for me and the way that he communicates and manages me and the way that they do as well, which is quite similar. It's just that it drives me nuts when he does it. So it's curious. All of that is interesting, but how to balance that. It's sort of, that's what's making me feel tumbled at the minute, in a good way. But all that vulnerability is a bit, for lack of a word for that.
Natalie, this book here might be of interest too to you.
Cool.
This dude's an entrepreneur that works at a really high board level. He's on a lot of kind of multinational boards.
Yeah.
And he was a failure in school.
Yeah.
And so he's talking about how school blunts down what he's looking for in terms of creativity, entrepreneurship, artfulness,
Yep.
and critical thinking, even though school's kind of not too bad on critical thinking. But that's a book that might kind of be really worthwhile.
Thanks.
I found it really good just to think about things in a different paradigm, but what type of emergent kind of worker we're actually looking for is not necessarily what school's producing. So what sort of skills do we want to add to their platform already? And that's been really, really quite good, and on a whole kind of number of levels for us.
Hmm. It's also worth them reminding, I'm sure I've said this, but in case I haven't, the whole format of this experience is inspired by Seth Godin. So about 3 years ago, I did Seth Godin's alternative MBA, and that style, not only the content, but the style and the way of learning together, this is completely inspired by him. So, and then Zane, I want to pick up on something that you just said. When Helen joins us in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if it's really interesting for you, one of the things that we could focus on with her is recruitment. And what she's doing with wellbeing teams in the UK is really focused on rethinking how recruitment could work in this sector. So, sorry, Graham, we're keeping the mic away from you. Go for your life.
That's fine. It's really interesting. You talk about alternative MBAs and all of that sort of stuff. I've been looking at MBA for a while, but I just have never really felt like I wanted to go down that space because of all of the corporate bullshit, and I've never really bought into that. But so I haven't really done a lot of reading in that space because I just read the same old crap that you just, not really. But having now read Reinventing Organisations, I'm looking for all of these other sources and just really excited about reading the literature. It's quite interesting. So it's lit a bit of a fire, and now I am actually really interested in reading a lot of stuff, but from that alternative sort of space. So yeah, it's been really interesting. The thing that I've been working on over the past week or a couple of weeks is setting up the communication channels. So if we're going to work in teams, and one of the things that I read that came out of obviously Bertzold was the importance of their IT platform for keeping the communication happening between everyone as you get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're going to use Slack, but then I realised we've just put in Office 365 and we've got Microsoft Teams as part of that free subscription. So swapped over to Microsoft Teams and just rolling that out, which is exactly the same as Slack, basically. And of course, it integrates with Skype for Business. So it's the same idea, getting the integration and the chats happening regularly. So been doing a bit of reading on how you can promote that and get people to buy into that as staff to start using that platform. Because I think our Gen Ys and Gen Xs are used to it, but baby boomers and the other staff that make up the majority of disability support staff are often not that tech savvy and not. A lot of them are hooked up on Facebook, so hopefully this sort of a platform is just a Facebook platform in the workplace. So that's sort of what I've been looking at recently.
Graham, when I went to Bertsorg, I'm not an IT person at all, right? But Jos talked about the IT system being the backbone of Bertsorg, and the thing that really struck me about it was that each team has their own page on their system, right? But what struck me was it looks like a website. It looks like a web page, not like our usual intranet stuff. So it's got kind of, the Frio team is their banner, and then you can see all the people, you can see their performance. It tracks how many hours, their billable hours, their non-billable time. It's just so accessible. And I mean, I'm not somebody who's into IT, but that's what really struck me, that it was so easy. And when I went out with a couple of the teams, I spent one day with a woman who was due to retire. She was a nurse, and she was really funny. So she'd talk about the young ones. They do all the input and data and all that. But she had her iPad, and she would get on and show me it. And yeah, it was just brilliant. It was really, really good system. Really good. Not like anything I've seen before, really, in organisations.
Yeah, it's and I picked that up from the reading that I've done, that they really talk about it's just crucial, as you say, the backbone of the organisation and the way everyone connects and stays connected. So yeah, obviously they've invested quite a lot in making that technology really, really work for them. So yeah, we'll start off with a free product and get that sort of happening, and then later on down the track, hopefully, we might get some sort of bespoke sort of system. But I think, as you say, if it's personalised like that, it just makes it even better.
Yeah. Can I add one little bit about that? That's, one of the things that in comms and engagement we sit in, and I think there's been a lot of focus for us here at Avivo about making a system that works to handle the funders and to connect, teams in that way, but an overarching intranet that holds the whole lot is like a second level of it. And it's the same thing. It feels like it feeds into the, the real work and not the real work. So at the minute we communicate with newsletters that we only get a 30% uptake on, Facebook posts that, we've only got 200 people on out of over 1,000. So, we know we're trying to spread it out so we get to everyone. But with an intranet that allows that type of personalisation, that goes alongside the component where you have to, sort out your rostering and speak to your customers and do that part. There's still those two parts. There's the part that connects everyone culturally to the organisation, and then the part that lets them do their work. So yeah, there's some kind of in the middle there that still has to carry that good user experience.
Okay.
I just wanted to talk to Susan. I saw her opposing Graham's comment around an NBA. Just want to hear about your thinking on that, Susan.
I think it's just raw for me right now. Just yesterday, and Kate, Leanne from our DDO group, she was ready to do, it wasn't quite an MBA, but it was a post-grad in org development from Northwestern, which is a prestigious university in the US. And she got rejected. She didn't expect this. She didn't even get a place. And was speaking to her about it last night. And again, this is completely from my perspective, that universities today are still teaching the Tayloristic scientific methods of management for the last 150 years. There might be some stuff about Japanese optimization or automation, but it's still very much teaching that old version of what management is. And I think that it's going to be people like us who are going to change the system, not prop up the old system. So I think that what I was saying to her, unless she wants to, because her big thing was, how do I seem valid, right? How am I able to go in and try to get a role to help organizations change if I don't have this piece of paper? And isn't it interesting that this is still what we think validates us? And yeah, for me, it depends on what you want to do, right? Do you want to disrupt that? Do you want to try to change the current system, or do you want to support the new system that's emerging? And I think if it's the latter, I think that there's different ways that you can earn your chops through practice, through different methodologies of learning and growing. And it's great that Helen's just joined us, because Helen and I actually met through the Alt MBA. So I'm always going to be the biggest advocate. But Graham, I'd love to talk about it, because I've gone back and done my post-grad, and many of us have, but really for me, it's about think about what you want it for before you make that choice.
Awesome.
Helen, good morning.
Good morning.
We've just gone off on a tangent. Yes, please.
Yeah, there's a fair bit I can agree with what you're saying. But if you're trying to create something new, it doesn't hurt to understand what is. And
of
there's
course.
a lot of seminal kind of work in management generally that is worth knowing without trying to recreate it. And in terms of it being an old paradigm, it's not been my experience at all. In fact, a lot of the entrepreneurship stuff that I am kicking in now as a direct result from courses like that. So absolutely agree with you to decide why it is that you want to be in it. But for the reading alone, I would say if you are working in new paradigms around organisational structure and management thinking, and you need to be able to think critically about what's wrong and what could be better. So what I found is that understanding what is was really useful, but it also gave me a bunch of tools for challenging that and turning it into new things.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Helen.
Hi,
Thanks
Helen.
for joining us.
Hi, Kate. It's really lovely to see you. And
Hi, I haven't seen you for years.
I know.
I haven't seen you for hours. We've been having a lovely, robust discussion, waiting for you, just checking in around what's been on our minds, what's our focus been for the last couple of weeks since we've seen each other. So it'd be nice maybe for you to arrive with the same check-in.
Thank you. So what's the question for the check-in, Susan?
Kate?
It was, what have you been focused on for the last couple of weeks?
The first thing that springs to mind is I had lots of fabulous assumptions about what it'd be like to start up wellbeing teams, and a couple of them are being significantly challenged. So what I've been focusing on has been identifying and working on some issues that we've been finding difficult around covering shifts. So that's, I think it'd be fair to say I've been obsessing about that. But yesterday we did a love note installation in the community that we serve and another community. So I think I've been focused on love and compassion and what that really means for us as a team and what we can do about it in the communities that we serve. Thanks, Kate. That's a really, really good question.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Kate, I would love it if you would just do a little intro to this program, this experience that we've been on together. And then maybe if everybody could do a very short tweet-sized introduction to yourself and what you're working on for Helen. Why don't you start?
Okay.
Kate?
So, Helen, you've joined Rethinking Organisations, which is a program, which is a regional program. So the majority of people who are part of the program, we've got quite a few apologies today, are working out in regional areas of Western Australia. So this is a fantastic medium for us all to connect. And the focus of the program has been exactly like it sounds, which is there a way to rethink how we do things? The people who are on this program are all working in human services, so they're human service organisations who will be supporting people with a disability, people who experience mental health, or older people. So, and I think that's probably, yeah, so everybody that's here today, that's kind of where they're coming from. We're probably midway through the program now, and we have different speakers that we get to come along and share their experiences, which I think everybody would agree has been fantastic, listening to how people have tackled organisations and where their focus has been. Yeah, and I think that's probably us, really. I think that's probably all you need to know about us, I think. So, Zane, do you want to introduce yourself?
G'day, Helen. Zane, I'm from Atlas, Access to Leisure and Sport. I'm in Geraldton, which is about halfway up the coast of Western Australia. We would probably call ourselves a little startup organisation. And basically what we say is if there's something that exists in community and it's legal, then our guys with disabilities are doing it. Get ready, we're coming.
Yeah, fabulous, thank you.
Nat?
Hi, Helen. I'm Natalie. I work for Avivo and I'm in the office. I'm part of the comms and engagement team. My interest here, I guess, is twofold. One for the organisation as a whole around strategy, comms, and the design of that and how that sits and how we help. And also our team is the first back office team, I think, first or second, to become a self-managing team. As of April, our manager's role was made redundant. So we've been sitting in a fair bit of new learning around what it looks like to be a self-managed team. Yeah.
Thank you.
Graham?
Hi, Helen. I'm Graham. I'm CEO of a small disability support organisation in Narrogin in Western Australia. We're about 2 hours southeast of Perth. And we're just really exploring the idea of how we might be able to do things differently. And just really excited about this program. There's been some great learning so far, and really looking forward to hearing you and hearing about your experiences and how things have changed for you over the last few years as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Helen, just before you get stuck in, are you happy? We're recording this session and we record them all and post them into our closed Slack channel, and there are 3 programs running, so we would want to be able to share that across the others. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Susan, are you interviewing Helen?
I've briefed Helen a little bit, so just I've invited her just to share a little bit of your story, talk specifically about the challenges and the joys of what you're doing now with wellbeing teams, and then Zane actually in the check-in was talking about changing the way we think about recruitment, and so it would be lovely if you could also focus equally on what you've been doing and exploring there, and then maybe go for 20 minutes, tap the break, get some questions, and see where the rest of the hour takes us.
Okay, that sounds great. Kate, could you give me a shout after 10 minutes? You've invited me to talk about my specialist subject, and I can talk for days and days and days.
Yeah.
Keeping me focused on specific things is the support I require. So Graham, my journey started as CEO of a health and care consultancy organisation, and I read Frederick Laloux's book, and that inspired me to give up my role of being the CEO and for us to become a self-managed team. So Natalie, probably a bit like your journey of how do you move from operating, I don't think we were particularly traditional, but I still felt like mum to everybody. And the big decisions all went through me, and I was the only person who knew what was going on with the finances. So that's been part of my journey. And I guess that was such important learning for us then to look at creating, Zane, a startup. So we would describe ourselves as a startup. We started serving people January the 24th this year. So we're really, really new. And we've currently got we've recruited 5 teams, and 3 of them are currently operational. So a really steep trajectory of growth and learning. And we're currently supporting people in Wigan, so that's in the northwest of England, in Oxfordshire, that's in the middle of England, and we've got contracts to start in the south and in another place in Manchester. So that's where we are. We've got 40 employees, and I call people employees, but we've got 40 colleagues who work with me, and we are serving about 50 people at the moment, and they're mostly older people and a couple of people with learning disabilities as well. So we have one team that just supports a family, which is a family with 2 sons with disabilities, so one team dedicated there. Natalie, we've been thinking really hard about our comms, and in the teams, one of the roles is the role of a storyteller. So our comms starts at a team level, and then the storytellers are supported to take information from the team, obviously with people's permission, and share it via social media. So we're really learning a lot about what comms and marketing looks like in a sort of self-managed team, and that feels like a really big shift from traditional comms, even though I've never been part of a traditional comms team. So wellbeing teams are small self-managed teams with no more than 12
Helen, can I just chip in for a second? Just a question. Just trying to get some context of where you're working. Kate, you might even be able to answer. I'm just trying to work out whether your context is similar to the WA rollout of NDIS, in that there's a whole bunch of new money for new services and that's why you're recruiting, or is it an existing market that you're...
So we are in the same context of personal budgets, but one of the ways that you can have a personal budget in the UK is called an individual service fund. Kate, what's it called in Australia?
It's more like shared management.
Okay, right. So the arrangement that we've got with commissioners is that each person we support has an envelope of money. So we know how much money they're entitled to have. And that gets translated into hours. And then we design the support with the individual based on the budget that they've got. So we're working within that ethos. And that's as close as it's got in home care, really. But we're applying exactly the same principles about personal budgets. So we account to people about how their money's being spent. So the teams are no bigger than 12. Our purpose is to do whatever we can to enable people to live well and be part of their community. So that's a broader purpose than traditionally home care would have in the UK. And the teams are supported by a team coach and also a practice coach. And we're really inspired by Birdsall's model, but we realised there were some things that had to be different in the UK because of the particular context. And two of those are the regulators. So the regulators in the UK are called the Care Quality Commission, and they require that every service delivering support to people living at home has a registered manager. So right from the get-go, we've got the challenge of the expectations of CQC is that we have registered managers and we want to work as self-managed teams. And then the other thing is there is a massive crisis of recruitment in the UK across the whole of health and care, with lots of predictions about how many extra care workers will be needed to meet the needs of an increasingly ageing population. And what typically happens in the UK in home care is people get recycled around different agencies, always believing that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And of course, it isn't. So that's what happens. And the other thing is the typical age of a home care worker. Well, I'm pretty much a good demographic for home care, women aged 50 plus. And of course, we're going to be retiring in 15 years, so that increases the demographic challenges around this population being served. So we decided that this was such a radically different way of working, that if you have previous experience of home care, you will have such a significant amount of unlearning to do. And even if you come from some other areas of our sectors in health or social care, again, this is a really different way of working. So we've intentionally recruited outside of care. And what we say to people is, if you've never had experience of care, welcome. We'll teach you everything you need. And if you have had experience of care, welcome. We've got a lot of unlearning to do. So that's how we've been pitching our recruitment. But actually, 80% of the people we've been recruiting have come outside of social care. And actually in the Oxford team, it's 100% of people we've recruited have come outside of social care. So we recruit people from hospitality and from retail. However, in the Wigan team, we've got Jodie, who's a hairdresser, and she's just fabulous. We've got Becky, who came out of university with a degree in theology, and like most students, her most pressing need was to earn money. She applied for any job that she could do, and ended up as a van driver and working in a distribution centre as well. So she came to work with us. And then we've got people who worked in shoe shops, we've got a couple of people who are childminders, we've had a teaching assistant too. So the reason that we have two coaches, Birdsall only has one, is in Birdsall people come with the understanding of what the role is. So many of them are nurses, they know what the nurse's role is, and what they need support with is how to operate in a self-managed team, and therefore the coach, his role is to support them around self-management. We have the double challenge of how do we support people who have no experience of health and care to deliver safe, compassionate, person-centred care to people in their own homes, and how do we support people who have no experience of self-management to operate as a self-managed team. So we therefore have two coaches. The practice coach's role is to support people to be great at care and support, and the team coach's role is to support the team to self-manage and to focus on their well-being, because the well-being in well-being teams is for two things. It's the well-being of the people we support, it's the well-being of the team, and actually it's three things, because we also want to make a direct contribution to the communities that we serve and contribute to the well-being of communities. So that's
good question for you, Helen.
Go on.
For us with the NDIS context,
Mm-hmm.
our guys are on an hourly rate rather than here's your money. And so a big challenge is the overhead stuff. So I'm just trying to piece together how you guys meet, you know, a bit around when it's not direct service provision. How do you fit that into your budgets?
Okay, so we're paid on hourly rates as well. That's no different to us. But like Birdsall, we don't have the same back office costs. So the team is completely mobile and we don't have offices. And the team meets for an hour and a half as a team meeting every week. And we use a community venue for that. So we'll meet in church halls or we'll meet in community centres. And each team decides where the most appropriate place is for them to work. We don't have comms and marketing teams. We have storytellers in each team. So the team take the responsibility for that. We don't have a separate HR team. The team does its own recruitment too. So we have a central team, like Birdsall, we have a really small central team where the team can get HR advice if they want to. But we don't have a permanent position for HR. We bring in the person and pay them an hourly rate, essentially, for the amount of support that we need. So we're incredibly lean in relation to back office support and costs. And those roles are really embedded within the team. So each team has a number of different roles. So one of the roles is recruitment coordinator. So they will be responsible with the practice coach and the team coach for doing our recruitment. One of the roles, as I mentioned, is the storyteller. They would take the function of comms and marketing in ordinary organisations. And the practice coach takes on the role of learning and development in ordinary organisations. And the team coach would essentially have the HR function in ordinary organisations. So we bring it, so if we can't have it within the team as a team specific role, it then becomes part of either the practice coach role or the team coach role.
Got it. So there's so rather than having a X number of hours position, it's just according to what each team's required, and then those people move from team to team to provide resource the different teams.
So in Wigan, we've got 3 teams. So we have one practice coach and one team coach supports all 3 teams. And then the practice coach and the team coach can call on HR support if they need it. And then we pay that centrally by the hour as they need it. So that support's available, but we don't have people sitting in offices in case people need it. We buy it on a need to have basis.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the back end of stuff, I think we've got a model that works okay. But we're still grappling with how to get all our casual workers in one spot at one time and pay for those guys.
So typically in home care, every team member would be, well, first of all, they wouldn't work in teams; they'd all be lone workers, although that might be described differently. And every single minute of your time would be face-to-face with people you support. So technically you might have 6 weekly team meetings for an hour and a half, but here people might not be paid for that, and they wouldn't get any other kind of support. So what makes us look more expensive is we pay people to be in a team meeting for an hour and a half every week, and we pay for people to have a buddy session with their buddy for an hour every month. And then the roles that I've just described have a different allocation of time against them, and we pay for that. So the storytellers are allocated an hour a month. Now that doesn't sound like very much time at all, but actually that's enough time for 4 or 5 Facebook posts and tweets, and that's what they do. And if we need more time for things, if we're writing up stories, that then gets negotiated with the team. And the scheduler's role, though, that's 2 hours a week. Because that's slightly more intensive. So different roles have a different amount of time allocated to them, which is paid time. And what the logic model around this is, because we don't have the same degree of back office staff, we can invest in paying our team members to have time that's off rota. And we look at something like an 85% of time on rota directly delivering to people, and 15% doing team functions, which is attending team meetings, buddy sessions, and fulfilling your roles. So that's how the finances have to work differently. So therefore, the payment of each hour that we get needs also to cover the 15% where we're not directly delivering. But the commissioners don't see that as any different. Essentially, we get that money and we have to figure out how to make that work, is the difference. We also pay people a bit more than the hourly rate that other organisations do, on the basis that they're taking a higher degree of responsibility with being a self-managed team. So we pay £9 an hour, and I think most people pay £7. Well, the living wage is £7.45. So I think our nearest competitor pays £8.15 an hour. So I know that the amounts won't mean anything to you, but you'll see that that's a bit different. To the
so the guys with the expertise that doesn't exist in the team, are they like on a sliding scale, or have you fixed their rates, or in terms of hours?
Our HR advisor, Gemma, we treat, she's a consultant to us, so she has an hourly rate that's appropriate to her level of expertise, and she invoices each month for however many hours she's used. So we essentially find the level of pay that's commensurate with the level of experience that we need, and negotiate that on an hourly basis.
So she invoices you, she'd be like a contractor rather than a staff member?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
you do direct recruit her? And she's
she'd be a contractor or consultant in the way that we operate. So I think there is, in terms of the new models of working, sort of bringing people in for just the amount of time that you need, rather than staff sitting in an office, is part of the different way of working. And there's a book called Exponential Organisations, which I found really fascinating, which is about organisations that will either need to scale really quickly or expand how they work really quickly. There's 7 principles around them, and one of the principles is around self-management, but there's also other things to play, about how much technology you're using, how agile you are. So we've been paying attention to that. So we're completely paperless. We don't have any offices, and we do everything from our smartphones or computers, and we don't use email. We communicate via Slack, and our recruitment is very, very different to everybody else's recruitment. So, Kate, how am I doing for time? Shall I start with?
So actually, Helen, I've just got totally engrossed. I'm sorry. So let me just check. Have we got you until 2:00?
I'm
7 o'clock.
Sorry.
So I can spend as long as you need. So
Right. Okay. Okay. So that would mean then we've got about half an hour left.
Yeah. Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear a bit about how the teams are going. So it's quite new, quite early days. So what are you experiencing, or what are the teams experiencing? I think that would be really helpful. For the rest of us, is there any particular theme you want Helen to focus on?
You mentioned recruitment earlier.
Yeah, recruitment. So recruitment would be good. So yeah, the kind of how are the teams doing, and recruitment. Is there anything else in particular, guys, that you want Helen to address?
I just interested. I did a bit of reading, Helen, that you've put online on your website and stuff, and obviously you guys use the holacracy decision making and communication process. So be interested to hear how that's been working as well.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear what the unexpected surprises are, and what the failures and problems are as well.
Okay.
Okay, so that's 4 topics in 30 minutes. It'll be like a game show. We can time you to see how well you do.
Okay, put your timer on for 10 minutes, and then right. I'll try and do it that way. So Zane, what I say is, I eat more, I drink more, I sleep less are the unexpected surprises of this way of working, which is part and parcel of being in the middle of a startup's first year. So I think any entrepreneur will have probably experienced that in the same way. So let's start at the beginning with how we recruit people. We use a value-based recruitment process. So we have values that we're really clear about that thread throughout our process. And what that means is that we don't ask for CVs. So typically in organisations, the first way you meet somebody is on paper, where the person is essentially showing off their qualifications and their experience. And we don't think that's a good way to find people for this way of working. So we advertise on Indeed, which is the standard sort of employment boards in the UK, lots of variants of that. And we do lots of recruitment via social media. And as we grow, we're seeing that more and more people are coming from word of mouth, which is obviously the ideal for us. We track our statistics every month, and I'll talk to you about that too. So even though we recruit on Indeed, and what I do is recruit on the other bulletin board. So I go on to customer service and retail, and I say, if you are great at customer service, we think you've got the values that will make you an excellent wellbeing worker. And if you've never considered a role in care, please have a look at this. So we do that for different, for retail and customer service and hospitality as well. So we intentionally advertise outside of the typical care. But what happens is people who are desperate for jobs, send CVs up to hundreds and hundreds and see what happens. So we instead of a job, a person specification, we have a version of a one-page profile, and we say, could this be you? So we list the qualities of the people that we're looking for, and the kind of things that might be important to them, and the support that we'll offer them. And the feedback that we get from people is that the way we recruit stands out from every other job advert that's on these boards. So we do that straight away. And then at the end of the adverts, we say, please get in touch. Don't send your CV. Answer these 3 questions. So the first question is, self-management isn't for everybody. What makes you think it could be for you? The second question is, our work is enabling people to have great days. And great days start with great mornings. What does a great morning look like for you? And the third question is, how far do you live from the centre of the town that we're recruiting to? So we want to recruit people who live within a 5-mile radius of where we're working from, because we want local people, we've got local community connections, and what we also know is a long commute to work is bad for your mental health. So we want to really, really get local people. And we want to give the message right from the beginning that self-management isn't for everybody. So we want people to think really carefully about why they think it might be for them. And we're saying, we want you to bring your whole self to work. And if you're not comfortable telling us what a great morning is for you, you're probably not going to be comfortable bringing your whole self to work. So those 3 questions are really specific for that purpose. So I then get an email with people's answers to those 3 questions. And I then say, thank you very much. And I send them to a website to book a call with one of the team. Now, the team who do this are the recruitment coordinators who are team members, and the team coach and the practice coach. And each week we'll upload, say, 5 half-hour slots each into Calendly. And that means that people who are prospective, people wanting to join us, go and choose a slot that fits in with how they're working at the moment. So they book a slot. We then phone them for half an hour at that time, so that the IT works, so I get to know who I need to speak to when. And then we have a series. So the purpose of that call is still an informal conversation where we're looking at whether we are a good fit for them and whether they're a good fit for us. So the purpose of the conversation is to make sure they really understand what wellbeing teams are like. So we answer their questions about the role and the expectations of it. And we ask them to tell us, what's great about the team that they're working in at the moment, what appeals to them about this role. So an informal conversation. And at the end of that half-hour conversation, we'll be pretty clear about whether we think they're a good fit for us or not. And we'll say, this sounds like it's got some great potential. Please, will you come and join us at our recruitment workshop? So we don't do interviews. It's all via a recruitment workshop, which is a 3-hour workshop. So at the end of that conversation, we'd say, we'd love to invite you to join the workshop. We're going to send your application pack now, and here's the date. And we ask them to phone and confirm whoever they've had the conversation with 3 days before the workshop. So again, typically in this sector, it's based on half-an-hour interviews, and there's a 50% no-show rate. So because self-management is about taking personal responsibility, and our second value is responsibility, we put the responsibility onto them to let us know whether they're still able to come or not. So the application pack, it still isn't a CV. So we ask people for the information that we legally have to ask before people will come and join us. So we do have to ask about the most recent employer and are you eligible to work in the UK and all that kind of stuff. But what they'll also get is the one-page profiles of the recruitment team. So typically there'll be 5 of us running the recruitment workshop. There'll be 2 wellbeing workers who are the recruitment coordinators in the team. There'll be the team coach or the practice coach, and there'll be me, and there'll be our co-production partner. So each team has a co-production partner, which is somebody with lived experience who works with us around recruitment and training, and actually is a mentor to the team around co-production. So what you get in the pack is the one-page profiles of the people that you'll meet on the day. So they'll know how many hens I've got, and they'll know that I've got 3 daughters, and they'll know that hating paying telephone tag is one of the things that drives me up the wall. So they start to learn about us as individuals before they meet us. And we also ask them to do their own one-page profile. We give them a template and we give them some guidance, and they bring their one-page profile to the workshop. So again, we're giving a really clear message that this is bringing your whole self to work. But the traditional hierarchies in organisations, which mean that you don't know who's recruiting you or anything about them, they're blown out of the water. But we're not asking you for your qualifications and your work history. We're asking you to tell us who you are as a person through a one-page profile. And we're expecting you to confirm whether you're going to turn up or not. Then what we do in this community room, it's theatre. So we set up the room with bunting, we have tablecloth, we have flowers on the table, we have music playing, we have a very welcoming reception desk, and people arrive. And we'll probably have about 15 people on each recruitment workshop, and it's set up on small tables. And Kate and I are old enough to know when there was enough money in the system where people used to be sent on team building workshops and things like that, and outward bound courses and wonderful things. So this feels more like a team building workshop than anything else. So we do hand massage with each other. The questions that we ask people at the initial conversation that we have with individuals we support, which would be called the assessment in old money. We practice those with each other. We have scenario questions, we have values questions. We build a tower with spaghetti and we see how high you can get it. And there's a prize for the team that get the highest one. But it's all really carefully thought out to say, what value is this testing out and how will we know? And the recruitment team have cards with the person's name on it and what each activity is trying to do. And they score each person out of 5, and they know what good looks like out of 5. And there's space comments as well. So the team members go around and watch people doing these different activities. But the last hour, people interview me. So we get people in small groups to come up with the questions that they want to ask about wellbeing teams. And the only interviews that happen on that day is that I get interviewed by different groups of people. So each group of 3 or 4 people comes up with their top 3 questions, and we ask those in the room. And before people get home in the evening, they will have received a Survey Monkey that says the process of recruitment has got 4 stages to it. How did we do for each stage? So the information, the initial conversation, the information pack that you got, the recruitment workshop, etc. What was it like for you? How did we do? What worked and what didn't work? And can you give us a score out of 5? And what we guarantee is everybody gets feedback by the end of the next day, whether they were successful or not. And the people who are successful, we invite to Slack the day after. And then we have a process of a month where we're keeping in really, really close contact with people via Slack. And we start our induction 4 weeks to the day after we've told people, because we're working on the basis that people would need to give a month's notice, and we do that. So we have a really, what's amazing is that the first day of induction, people greet each other like long lost friends, because they've been on this really powerful recruitment experience together. And they've been spending a month talking to each other on Slack that we've been hosting and facilitating via the team coaches. And the week before induction, they start making self-managed decisions, really small one, how are we going to manage lunches in induction? But we start that process with them. So that's our recruitment process.
That's exactly 10 minutes. Can you believe that? 4 seconds? That's fabulous. Okay.
Is it? So then, how are the teams going? Well, we have a 5-day recruitment. So on day 1, it's bring the whole self to work. So we have beautiful templates where we get people to chart their work histories and to tell us what skills and hobbies they bring, and what worked and didn't work about their work so far. and what their aspirations for the future are. And then we use that information to co-create with the team agreements, the social contracts that you'll hear Susan and Kate talking about. And we build on people's one-page profiles. And we also do something called stress and support, which is one of the kinds of things that are likely to make you feel stressed. How can we support you to recognise that? And what can we support you to do to build your resilience around stress? And how can the team support you? So the first day is all about bringing the whole self to work, and how we can support each other in a team, and how we support each other through team agreements. And then the second day is around self-management, and that's where we look at the different roles within the team, and we get people to put themselves forward for different roles, and they self-select into the roles. And that's where, Graham, we start practicing our holacracy practice. So we don't ever use the term holacracy with the team, but we have a very specific meeting process that's rooted in positive productive meetings, which is how we've a person-centered approach to meetings, and holacracy tactical meetings. So it means that we look at metrics together at every team meeting, and we have a process of raising and addressing tensions. And we have two boards. So as you come into the team meeting, every team member is a linked wellbeing worker for somebody we support, or two people. So in old money, that will be a key worker. So there's somebody that you are particularly focused on as a linked wellbeing worker. And we have a living well at home board, and everybody has a sticker with the initial of the person they're supporting. And the board's got on track, off track, and way off track. So as you come in, you put the sticker with the initials of the person that you're linked wellbeing worker on the board. So you'll either be putting on track, off track, or way off track. And there's another board where we collect our metrics, so number of compliments, complaints, instances, so the things that we have to track for being a registered organisation. So we track all of those things as well. So we'll put those numbers on the board together. And when you're in probation, so your first 3 months you're in probation, we have an on track, off track, way off track board for that as well. So we have specific tasks that people need to complete each week of their 12-week probation that either relate to your competence in self-management or your competence in delivering person-centered care. And you come in and you put your initials on the board to say whether you think you're on track, off track, or way off track. And then when we get to the section, so about the hour, so if it's an hour and a half, a whole hour of the meeting is raising and addressing tensions. So the first thing we look at is who's off track or way off track for the people we support, and what are we going to do about it. So it's a bit like a mini multidisciplinary meeting or case conference every meeting, where we're thinking deeply about the people we support and our support of them, and whether there's anything we need to do to make sure they're living well at home. And then around probation, people who are off track or way off track, we say, what do you need to get back on track? So people take responsibility for identifying for themselves what they need to do to get back on track with probation, and what support they might need from the coaches to do that. And then the rest of the meeting, people are raising tensions, and a tension is anything that's stopping us delivering the best support we can and being the best self-managed team that we can, or a tension between what we see as possible that we're not doing yet that we think we could do. And the tensions and the actions are recorded as well. But if addressing a tension is outside the sphere of responsibility of the team, it then gets escalated to me and the national team, and we have responsibility for addressing it and getting that information back to the team, and that would happen on a weekly basis. And then the other thing is we have the rest of the world would call it a staff engagement questionnaire, but it's a well-being and engagement questionnaire. It's called PEAKON, which is PEAKON. We do it monthly. It takes the team 5 minutes, and it directly relates back to our values as well. So some of the questions have changed because we're a self-managed team. Traditionally, with staff engagement questionnaires, they go back to the senior managers, and you may never know what happens to them, and it may just be done to inform business planning or whatever. But in wellbeing teams, the information comes back to the team so that you get the numbers and you get the comments. And instead of you said we did, it's you said, so what are you going to do? So the team have all the data, and the question is, this is what you're telling us about your experience. These are the 3 areas that we're really strong on. These are the 3 areas that we need to develop. What should we do together to develop in those 3 areas? and what actions do we need to take, and is there anything that we need other people to do, and other people would be me. And every 6 months, three months first of all, and then every 6 months, there's a person-centered team review, where instead of the team meeting, the team comes together for an hour and a half and says what's working and not working for us, about how we're living our values, about how we're living our purpose, about how we're living our team agreements, and anything else we want to pay attention to. And we have a whole session that's just about how are we doing as a team. So that's how does that work? How's it really? So, Zane, did you have a question?
Yeah, lots of that's on kind of organisational and team and service development. Whereabouts does your PD and training that comes from outside the organisation fit into all of that?
So that the 5-day induction covers all the mandatory. So people do a lot of the mandatory training that we have to do via e-learning before we start. So if people aren't working for the 4 weeks,
so that's essentially delivered internally, right?
Absolutely. So by e-learning and our practice coaches. So we don't have an internal trainer for moving and handling. So we buy that in for the day, and that's part of the 5-day training. Then the teams have their own learning and development budget. So they then determine what additional training and support they need based on the individuals we're supporting. So if we're suddenly supporting somebody that's end of life, we need the people who are supporting that individual to feel really confident and competent around that. What we don't do is train everybody in end-of-life support, because it may be 2 years before you're supporting somebody at end of life. That doesn't make any sense to us. But for the people that need that. However, I would be mortified if anybody used that budget to go on external training, because there's so many other ways that you can be trained. So we look at sort of e-learning, we look at what's on YouTube, we look on the kind of courses that are available via Udemy. So we think really differently about how people get their development and learning needs met. That's rooted in the people we support and what they need, but we wouldn't assume that training and development is about going on courses.
It's interesting because a lot of our training and development happens in Perth here, which for us is, it's a $400 flight to Perth and back, plus accommodation, meals, wage, the whole thing. So that I'm really interested in that, how we kind of can leverage that. That would be really good.
One of my metrics is sending people away on a course for a day is system failure for me, because it's an utterly inefficient way of using people's time and our money in terms of travel and all of that. And it's based on the assumption that 7 hours learning is what you need to deliver something. And historically, we've done that for the convenience of the organisation and because you can buy trainers in for a day. And Kate, the irony of me spending 18 years as trainers and consultants, and now thinking that is so not the way to do that anymore. So there's the theory of learning that we base this on. It's called, I really recommend you read Jane Hart's book. It's called Modern Workforce Learning. And she's got it as a book, but if you go onto her website. And the processes we use, it's called flipped classroom, that says that actually you get your content through e-learning or different online ways. And the face-to-face time that you spent is always thinking about how you apply that. So face-to-face time, this is face-to-face time, as far as we're concerned. And we only use face-to-face time for applying and problem solving. So we use lots of scenario-based learning, and we'll do that in buddy pairs, and we might do that in team meetings, and we might do it like this. And we have a series of what-if questions. So what-if questions are, what's the most awful thing you can consider happening in your role in supporting people at home? And we start using those questions in recruitment. So in recruitment, we have scenario sessions using these what-if questions. So we're testing out people's ability to use their common sense. So one might be, you turn up at somebody's house, you ring the doorbell, nothing happens, what do you do? So that would be one of our recruitment questions, and we're figuring out how people use their common sense around that. Then in induction, we come back to the scenario questions when we've done more training with people and say, you turn up at somebody's house, what do you do? And we've got our policies and procedures, but we give everybody a how we work handbook. It's really small, which is the translation of what you actually need to know from the policies and procedures, that says if you turn up at somebody's house and nobody's there, here's 6 things that we'd be expecting you to figure out and do. And then after 6 weeks in our recruitment process, thank you, we send out a survey monkey to say, how confident are you in addressing these questions? So
how do you deal with requirement for like a piece of paper from some authority, i.e. like a senior first aid certificate?
Well, first aid, manual handling and medication are the only ones that we do face-to-face in the first 5 days training, for exactly that reason, because it's required. So any mandatory training where there's no other way of getting around that, and actually I want people to go out on work, knowing how to lift people well and give medication. So we do all those in the first 5 days, but that would be the only face-to-face training the team members will do. And it means we're not having to take people off shift because they haven't started shifts yet. So they do those 5 days training, then they'll do 5 shadow shifts of existing team members, and then they'll be working in the way that we hope them to work.
Helen, there's less than 10 minutes left.
Cool.
And so I think you've covered recruitment. I think you've touched on holacracy. Is that okay, Graham? Yeah. And then you said we've got how teams are doing and unexpected surprises.
Okay. So Peakon scores tell me that people feel, and comments, that they really feel aligned with the values of the organisation. They really believe in the ethos of the company and what we stand for and feel really connected to that. And there are 2 areas that we are consistently not doing well on in our Peakon scores, which will be our surprises. So my biggest surprise was that my assumption was that because we were working this way, our sickness would be really low. And in the first 2 teams, we've had 3 people with significant episodes of sickness, which has put significant pressure on the rest of the team to cover their shifts. And I'm going, I didn't see that coming. I thought one of our huge triumphs would be low sickness. How is that happening? Now, we're probably not at greater sickness than any other organisation, but it's not what I was expecting. So when I track the people who have been off sick and what they've been off sick for, we see 2 patterns emerging. One is it's our younger team members. So if you look at generations, so you've probably heard of generation Z, X, Y, and baby boomers. And baby boomers are 50 plus people. Generation X, Z are the people who are fresh out of college. And actually it was 2 people who were fresh out of college that went off with stress really quite early on. So not only was I ashamed that we had such high sickness, I was equally ashamed that it was stress that people were going off with. Our team's a well-being team. How on earth are people going off with stress? What's going on? So when we did a detailed analysis of it, so this is more stressful because we're taking people who have no experience of adult social care and no experience of self-management. So what we're doing now is, so we think we can predict that the younger people who join our team are likely to find the first 4 to 6 weeks more difficult than people who've got more life experience. So in Oxfordshire, where we've just started our new team, we're saying to the team coaches, pay extra attention to these 2 folk, because actually our stats tell us that they're more likely to struggle than other people. So we're starting to address that earlier. We also put in a new policy around sickness that says if in the first, if in an X month period you've had more than 3 episodes of sickness, or you've had 5% of your time off with sickness, we have a different conversation, but we involve the buddy in that. So the buddy and the team coach do return to work conversations with the individuals, and we do so we've got a different plan for that happening. So what it was just the team coach, and now it's the buddy and the team coach. So the buddy can keep supporting the person around that area. So 2 people going off with stress, and they're both, we paid a lot of attention to people coming back to work well, and the person who was off stress. Actually, I'm sitting with a card on my desk where she's said what fabulous support she's had returning to work. So we know we do that really well. We need to stop it happening in the first place. The other person has got 2 long-term conditions that they're managing. What we knew was we should have said goodbye to them in the first 3 months of probation for many reasons, not just their sickness. We weren't brave enough to do that because that would have put a hole in our schedules, and that felt too vulnerable for the team. So my learning is we have to be really, really bold to say goodbye to people in the first 3 months of probation if we know then that they're not a good fit for us, and and we weren't brave enough to make that decision because we were worried about how we were running shifts. So the biggest shock for me was the challenge of managing shifts, because I hadn't anticipated we'd had the levels of sickness that we'd had, and therefore that became the biggest issue with the team. So we've been working on this with the team, and now we've got 3 things in place. We've got somebody who works off rota all the time, and what their role is, and then they're one of the more experienced team members, and they cover holidays for the team and cover sickness. So have somebody off rota who does that. And then the second line of defence is all the team have what we call a shadow rota. So here's the rota that you do, and you have to be available for 2 other shifts a week in case we need them. So they say, actually, I've always got availability on the Thursday night. I don't do much on the Thursday night. So actually, if we need cover, I'm happy to be the first port of call after the other person. So one is Jodie picks it up, second is the shadow rota, and then third is we have our own version of bank staff who are called wellbeing assistants, and they're on 0-hour contracts. So we think 0-hour contracts are a really bad thing for most people, but the people that we're working with as wellbeing assistants have other jobs, but want to earn more money. So available weekends and evenings, and also want to test out whether we're a good fit for them. So they don't want to leave their jobs and come and work with us, but this is a way that they can test out that as well. So actually what we're doing is then building it up, a bank of people who want to work with us in the future, who've got experience working with us and then could step into additional roles as they happen. So the big surprise is I didn't think I'd be thinking with the team about how we cover rotas in the way that we've had to. The joy is we think we've got 3 things in place that most organisations wouldn't have in place to do this, that I'm hoping is going to be a solution for that. But essentially, if we can make wellbeing teams work in home care, which is the trickiest place to work, we can do it anywhere. So we're starting to talk about teams supporting people with learning disabilities in their own homes, teams supporting people with mental health issues, because if we can demonstrate it here, I think wellbeing teams are a unit of support that can then work in different neighbourhoods with different people. And my dream is that we support people on a neighbourhood base, and we don't need to worry ever about what labels people have, because we can support people at end of life, we can support people into employment, we can support people who live at home with their families, we can support people who live in different kind of accommodation, regardless of whether your label is learning disabilities, mental health, long-term conditions. So that's my aspiration, is that we are neighbourhood support teams that focus on the well-being of anybody in that particular geographical neighbourhood, and the well-being of the community too. So that's the biggest surprise.
Sorry to interrupt, Helen. It's really interesting to hear that the pragmatics of the rostering come back into play, because rostering is just the bane of everyone's existence, but it still comes back into play even with the best of intentions and the greatest philosophies. And I'm really interested to hear. So you have a scheduling person that is a member of the team providing supports as well. They obviously they have their 2 hours to do the roster. Is it the onus on team members, if they're not able to make shifts, do they organise their own replacements, or does it go back to the scheduler to do?
So this has been a great part of our learning, great in a steep as opposed to great part of our learning. So the scheduler, as you say, that's an additional role within the team. Traditionally, it would be held by a manager. We have a 2-week rolling schedule. So people should know their shifts in advance, so they can plan their life around them. And if you know, so one of the things we do in induction is go through what if you wake up, you feel really, really poorly, you know you're not going to be able to get to work today, what do you do? And you've got a plan for that. So the first thing is you would speak to your buddy. So and your buddy would then work with the scheduler to see who else might have availability, and you post it on Slack, and the scheduler and the buddy try and figure that out. So we have that going on. And then we have the processes that I've told you about. So it would be, I can't cover the shift this morning, thinking about, so if I'm really poorly, your buddy and the scheduler picks it up. If it's something like you've had a childcare massive malfunction, we'll be expecting you to be on it with us because you're not ill, and figuring that out together. So the buddy and the scheduler look at the schedule, see who might be available. So Jodie would be off rota. So if Jodie's not covering somebody's holiday, Jodie would be our first line of events. If Jodie's already covering holiday, we'll look at people's shadow shift availability and go to them next. If they're not available, we'll then go to our wellbeing assistants, who are our bank staff, and go to them next. The ultimate disaster is the team coach goes out and covers it. And when that happens, that's a system failure, and it goes to the team meeting, and we do an analysis about why that happened. But for me, sleeping at night, I know that's the worst case scenario for us, because team coaches won't, or practice coaches won't be covering, are available to us because they're not on schedule and they're not delivering care. So theoretically, we've then got 2 other people who could step in if the worst came to the worst. Last week, I had my worst nightmare. I got a phone call at 10 o'clock at night saying, you're the last man standing. I feel the fear just telling you about that. I live 40 minutes away from where the service is, but I was last man standing, and I was on shift at 6:30 the next morning. So I have a huge vested interest that we really figure this out, because really, that's my worst nightmare. So I went in with care L plates. But what I expect from the team coach and the practice coach is that they are doing a shift a month, working alongside our colleagues from a here's how we learn how it's really going, here's how we pick up stuff that we need to pay attention to, and here's how we demonstrate that we're supporting, that we're really alongside our colleagues around that as well. So Graham, yes, the rostering stuff, my nightmare as well, but the great thing about a startup is how agile we are. So I was talking to the team about what we could do. I put my proposals about here's how I think we can cover it. I asked for people's feedback on our proposals on Slack, and by Sunday night we were advertising for wellbeing assistance. So in typical organisations, that would have to go through 6 layers of decision making and the board saying, can we do this? But we just go, shit, we need to do this, let's do it and test it. So we have a test and learn approach to everything. We are always doing experiments. Each new team, I'm saying, what assumptions can we test with this team? What can we do better and differently with this team? And how can we make that work? But it feels like every 6 weeks, we're updating everything based on what we've learned and adjusting things. So we've got a new team that are going through induction next week. I've updated the handbook to reflect what we've learned over the past 6 weeks. So their handbook is slightly different to the handbook we were issuing back in January.
Thank you, Helen. That was fantastic. Brilliant. It sounds really exciting and really challenging. I think we're all with you on the rostering. Yeah, I think we're all with you on that. Okay, so we're at the end of the session. So shall we just do a quick checkout? I'll start, and I just want to say thank you very much. That was so helpful. I think we'll have all got lots of different pieces out of that, and I'm sure the other groups will when we post the film. So thank you so much. Okay, Zane?
Yeah, look, Helen, for me, this has been the best session we've had so far. Just having somebody that's starting up and being able to pick your brains like we do is very much appreciated. There's a fair bit for us as an organisation in this session. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Graham?
Yeah, Helen, absolute pleasure, and thank you for sharing the highs and lows and the insights that you've learned. And I've been really enjoying the stuff that's online as well, that you, on your website and your YouTube videos and your presentations. So yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nat?
Yes, thank you. More questions. Can I get a copy of the How We Work handbook?
If you just check out, and I'll tell you how we can do that.
Perfect.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah, just thanks, Mady. It was great. And yeah, I think that's really about it. Just really appreciate the way that you work out loud and share everything you do. I think that we were having a little conversation just before you joined about what do you want to do? Do you want to try to impact an existing system or disrupt it by starting something new? And yeah, really appreciating that I think you're kind of doing both at the same time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Helen?
Graham, thank you for, I feel like you indulge me, me being able to talk about the things that matter most to me, about how we're working and what we're learning. And there's so much more about community and knitting and things like that I would love to talk to you about. But I have a working out loud practice, which means that I commit to doing a weekly film about what I'm learning and trying. So come and find me on LinkedIn, and I post what I'm learning each week there. It's just 2 minutes. Graham, I have really strong views about the conversation I came in at the end. So come and find me on LinkedIn if you want to pick that up. So as a CEO who's made that transition and what I'm doing now, I have strong ideas about what is useful or would have been useful for me in the past. And one of the frustrations, Natalie, is I couldn't find information about how other people had done that, particularly birdsong. I was kind of hoping that the birdsong recipe would be on their website somewhere in English and I could just follow it, and clearly it wasn't there. So we're starting something in September, which is a website called Open Teams, where every single one of our policies, processes, handbooks, etc. will be on that for people to download and use, and then we'll update every version as well. So if we've written it and it's useful for you, you'd be able to go and take it as part of working out loud. And I think the generosity that is part of the community that's trying to work in a really different way, how we support each other by sharing learning and sharing documentation and things like that feels really a strong part of it. So I'll make sure, so Susan will obviously know when that goes live, and Kate will as well, and I'm sure they'll share that with you. Thank you. It's a joyful way to spend a Friday morning for me.
Well, have a lovely weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Helen.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Kate, just before you go,
Yeah.
Will you send me an email about what we talked about?
Yes, I'll send you an email with the link, Graham.
Fantastic.
To the rooms, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
All right, great. Thanks, Kate.
Brilliant. Okay, cheers. See you later.
Stop recording, Kate.
Oh, yeah, good idea.